The other thing is we are finding that ticks are carrying more things. This isn't just about Lyme disease. This is about a lot of other nasty things that are in ticks. And we see here basically the kind of ticks that we are most concerned with here in New York, but in the United States as well and in other places. And the first is the black-legged tick. That's our real demon in terms of Lyme disease. That's what gives us Lyme disease. And Lyme accounts for about 80% of all tick-borne illnesses that occur in the United States. But it gives more than just Lyme disease. These ticks can be infected with a number of things, some of which your doctor doesn't know to look for and doesn't know much about, some of which there aren't good tests for. An emerging illness is called Borrelia miyamotoi, and it's a relapsing fever kind of tick-borne illness, and we don't have a good test for it. The doctor has to know to look for this, to read up on it, when the Lyme disease test itself comes back negative and tells him his patient, who he thought might have Lyme disease, does not. And of course, we're going to get to the limits of the test later, because the test is not very good, no matter what it says. Okay, other things in ticks. We've got probably the second leading organism that is of concern in the black-legged tick is Babesia. That causes something called babesiosis. There have been predictions by some very eminent scientists that it could become as bad as Lyme disease someday. And again, your doctor has to know to look for it. It's a different test. It's a kind of difficult test sometimes. And if your doctor treats you for Lyme disease, thinks you have Lyme disease, but you also have Babesia, the antibiotics you take will not respond, will not treat the babesiosis. Babesiosis is a malaria-like illness. It needs anti-malarial drugs. And by the way, if you get these two illnesses at once, which a lot of people do, they're called co-infections, they're much worse when combined, when you experience them together, than either alone, which I guess makes a lot of sense. Then there are other things on the list. Powassan virus is of concern because there's a high fatality rate. It's named for a 7-year-old boy in Powassan, Canada, who died from it about 40 years ago or so. We've had several deaths in New York State this year. It's becoming more prevalent, but we don't know exactly how much or how difficult a problem it's going to be. So the other really up-and-coming tick is the Lone Star tick, and that has really taken up residence in a lot of real estate in the country, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and what it can do. And the American dog tick, which has been around for a long time. We've known about that, but it now is, carrying some serious pathogens, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which can be fatal, as can tularemia. So anyway, we're now going to look at what organisms are found in some of the ticks right here in Long Island. And a group from Columbia University published last April, and they looked at 500 ticks, basically around Long Island Sound, on the Connecticut side and on the Long Island side. And they found, the usual suspects. They found Lyme disease in more than half the ticks. That is a high percentage, but it's not very unusual in terms of, you'll find that in the Hudson Valley, you'll find that in other places in the Midwest. Many ticks are infected with these organisms, but there were other things as well. 11% had anaplasma, which can cause more of an acute disease, very dangerous for people with compromised immune systems, for the elderly in particular. Borrelia miyamotoi, now that's something we didn't know about before, maybe 10 years ago. And it is in 5% of ticks here. Babesia in 8%, and we see Powassan virus as well. Other things, nasty things that we don't really know much about either in ticks locally. A filarial nematode in 14%. We're not quite sure what that does, but that's a worm. And then they found 14 viruses. The interplay between all of these pathogens is really not known. So, when you get Lyme disease and when you stay ill, there are many questions. Why do people stay sick after taking the standard course of antibiotics? It could be because of some of these other things that are in ticks. Now, this is about the Lone Star tick. And this is a map from the Centers for Disease Control, which basically shows that the Lone Star tick, which kind of started right here in the American South. It's been there for years, not in the numbers that it's there now, but it likes the hot, steamy weather. Well, all of a sudden, it's just exploding. It's moving north. It's moving west. Lots of movement. And this is an interesting tick. It's called by the Centers for Disease Control aggressive. It's an aggressive tick. So when I'm writing my book, I call the CDC and I say, how is a tick aggressive? Put up your dukes kind of thing. And they said, well, this tick will stalk you. Unlike the black-legged tick, which I described climbing up that blade of grass and just sort of waiting for a passerby, doesn't really move horizontally. These fellas, they move horizontally, and they move fast. They also are really not very unhappy in the hot sun. They come from the south. So people on the eastern end of Long Island, they're having picnics on their lawn, in their backyards, and they're being overwhelmed by ticks crawling up their legs. Some people have put their homes up for sale out there because there are so many Lone Star ticks. And that's what a Lone Star female looks like. That's where it gets the name, this little yellow badge on its back. But beyond being a nasty, aggressive, stalking tick, it may make you allergic to meat, which fits perfectly in this conference and the theme of this conference, as well as, in some cases, dairy products. And this is really a case study in the global nature of tick-borne illness. Within the last 10 years, we found out about this meat allergy. And the way it was discovered is there was an allergist by the name of Cheryl Van Noonen in Australia. And she was noticing that her patients were coming in with this very serious allergic reaction, in some case going into anaphylactic shock, being unable to breathe. And that would happen after they had mammal meat. And she also deduced from doing a lot of questioning that these people had been bitten by a tick weeks before. At the same time, there was a group in Virginia at, I think, Commonwealth University, who were also noticing this allergy, trying to figure out what the heck these people were actually allergic to, and they discovered the actual molecule that people were responding to. It's called alpha-gal. This is called alpha-gal syndrome. So Cheryl Van Noonen discovered that it was tick-related. The people in Virginia discovered that what it was that the tick was giving to the people. And, I say that as an example of the global problem that we have. All of us, we never had this. We never had this problem. And all of a sudden, it's in several dozen countries. Different tick down there, too, that imparts it. So in the future, we're going to see more movement of Lone Star ticks as well. In this slide, you'll see that pretty much the Dakotas and Iowa and Wisconsin and so forth are okay for now, but not for long. The predictions are, and this is a study that was done by some CDC researchers, that all of Iowa and Illinois and Indiana and elsewhere is going to be fertile territory for the Lone Star tick. And one thing to note, it's not just the heat that is pushing these ticks around. Vapor pressure, namely humidity, is something that attracts ticks and keeps them happy and keeps them humming along. So it's warmth, but it's also humidity. And a lot of places are more humid because of our changing climate.